Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this video today, I just want to talk about everyone's favourite Formula 1 driver in Lewis Hamilton. Now, for all of those who do not know, over the weekend, Lewis has now passed the great Michael Schumacher by winning his 92nd race, putting him in the #1 spot in terms of outright race wins. Now, he would also likely to match Michael Schumacher's outright drivers' championships this year, because he's far and away the #1 at the moment. With 7, because at the moment he's on 6 driver championships. He should be on 7 at the end of this year, and he will be heavily favoured to overtake that and become the outright winner, or say outright lead in terms of drivers championship, if things go as expected based on the current trend over the last few years. Now, with all that being said, what we should have been seeing over the last, I suppose, few days over the weekend from the news and the media is nothing but adulation and praise for one of, if not the greatest sportsman that Britain has ever produced. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, for the most part, from what I've seen and heard from many forms of the media, whether it be newspaper, media, socials, etc., everything regarding what Hamilton has achieved over the last few days have been nothing but fainted praise and congratulations. You know, those underhanded compliments that you get. That's all I've been seeing. You see, despite one of the greatest feats produced in his sport, in his lifetime, in a generation that we didn't think that this would ever be topped, people still couldn't help but show their hatred and contempt for a man that, if we're being truthful and honest, if you look at what he's done wrong, I still can't find any evidence that he's actually done anything wrong. You see, one thing which people growing up in Britain and people who are sports fans who like sports like myself will notice is when it comes to sporting heroes, there's a clear hypocrisy that exists. And I'm not talking about racial lines, but just in general. And what do I mean by this? Fans, pundits and media talk all the time about how modern day sports stars, they're not what they used to be. They're all robots, PR trained to say the right thing. They got no personalities, not being true to themselves like they were back in the day. All this kind of stuff that gets leveled at them. All right, fine, cool. So when a sports star comes along and books that trend, shows all the personality which I assume they wanted to hear from him in terms of how real they were, down to earth they are, whatever it may be, I thought they'd be on this side. But nope, here they come. The same fans, the same pundits who were at one end of the stick, moaning about it, but now here they come moaning with pitchforks telling them to shut up and play, or in this case for Lewis Hamilton, shut up and drive. And again, when it comes to this is where Hamilton's haters are at in full force. You see, Hamilton's biggest faults, for those who don't know, is not because he's robbed anyone. He's not killed anyone. He's not a man who ruined his talents by drinking and partying like we've seen other sports stars down the years. You look at George Best, you look at all these other sports stars who's, even like Kimi Raikkonen, who, again, Britain loved Kimi Raikkonen for his outspoken ways, and even though he's a drinker and a partier who's, for his talent, he's not really come up to much, subject for another video, but he's not slept with his brother's wife or caught cheating on his girlfriend or any other thing like that, which, again, other prominent sports stars that are so loved by the British media have done. He hasn't missed a drug test, and you don't hear him getting into any bar fights at all. He doesn't do any of that. So what exactly is, with all that being said, what is Lewis' crimes that causes him to have so much division when talked about by the public? I'll tell you what it is. All it is that he freely speaks about his beliefs in regards to what he thinks is the right way to go and live life. Now, he is a vegan who does preaches about saving the environment, climate change, and all this kind of other stuff. And people do think that he's a preacher and he's a hypocrite, etc., etc. And here's the thing. I'm not going to disagree with you on this one. He comes across as a hypocrite. He comes across as a bit sanctimonious because, again, he's able to live in his ivory tower and he's preaching to the peasants, so to speak, about how to live their life when he can live his life to the fullest because he has all the finances and everything in place that allows him to do so. But my days, if that is what Lewis Hamilton's biggest crime is, as one of the greatest sports stars that Britain have ever produced, then you guys are softer than I thought you ever were. You see, again, I did a video on this about how we always talk about the lefty snowflakes being so soft that anyone has a different opinion to them. They just can't handle it. They can't handle it. Yet again, it's not the left who seems to be at the most pains with Lewis Hamilton. It's those on the right. And again, what has he done exactly? He's not done anything at all. He's not troubled anyone, at least personally, from what I understand, from what I hear so far. That could change. But yet and still, his belief system, again, something which you can say, you know what, I disagree with and move on. But no, you guys are up in arms and you guys can't help yourselves in showing just how the hatred, it runs especially deep. Now, people point to this year, particularly talk about BLM and, you know, all the things that he's preached and all the things that he said, but it is so much deeper than this. This is not the first time that Lewis Hamilton has divided opinion. He's always been like the Marmite of Formula One, especially when it comes to Britain. He's always been one who divides opinion. He's always been the one who, depending on who you talk to, they love him or they hate him. So this year, I'm going to exclude. I'm not saying it doesn't count towards people's feelings, because people, in my mind, have used this to add further fire to what they already felt about the guy. This is the thing about this year, which is so wonderful. People think that this year, is causing all this divide, all this kind of stuff. No. A lot of it is showing exactly where the divide already was, like Brexit. But the difference is it's more vocal. See, Britain are one of those things things aren't as vocal like in the US, where the US are more vocal than I think they actually are in terms of a divide. Whereas in Britain, we like to think, it's not divisive, not this, but it's just not as vocal. All what this is showing is people they're a bit more vocal and they got a little bit more license to be able to say exactly what it is that they really think. And again, for those like me, who watch Formula One, it's even funnier because now what people try and do is, instead of actually talking about him as the man, now they're actually trying to discredit his achievements, which, when they talk about these things, it shows two things. Well, really one thing, really, which is their lack of understanding of the sport. And again, one thing I've been talking about in regards to Britain and how they treat their sports star, it's just Britain's propensity to knock down any single hero or any single star who's in the ascendancy or who's on the top of the tree whenever it comes to sporting achievements. We don't like winners. We don't like winners in this country. I don't care what anyone says. We love a lucky loser. We love a plucky loser. That's why we love Tim Henman. We don't like Andy Murray. We hold Andy Murray to these ridiculous standards that we never held Tim Henman to do it. Even though Henman never got to a championship, he never got to a Grand Slam final. He only got to semi-finals of Wimbledon. Andy Murray's gotten to so many finals. He's won 3 Grand Slams so far, and we give him all the crap. Where Tim Henman, Tim Henman, we love Tim Henman. We love Tim Henman. And why do we hate Andy Murray so much? Because apparently, and this was in jest, if he ever understood what he said, it was in jest about Scotland and England in the World Cup, about he's not going to support England. It was all in jest, taken out of context. But again, people use that to bury him and hit him over the head. Again, another sports star who's the best British tennis sports star we've ever had in the modern era. But again, that's a subject for another video. But back to Lewis Hamilton. There are 3 examples that come to mind as to what people are trying to do to discredit his achievements when it comes to his sporting heroics. The number one is the fact that he lives in Monaco, which is a tax-free haven. Now, this is something that will always follow him for as long as he lives there. But the funniest thing about this is something that most Formula One drivers do, including another ex-Formula One champion who you guys love in Jenson Button. So when I hear these talk about, he's flying the British flag, but he lives in Monaco, I'm like, well, join the club. This is something which, again, if you had the money, you would do the exact same thing. You would try and move into a place which will further increase your ability to keep the money that you earn. This is just natural. This isn't something which is just new. This is not something which is a Lewis Hamilton exclusive. This is not something which, Lewis Hamilton's doing something that no other Formula 1 driver has ever done before in Britain. Nope. He's doing something which has always been done. But again, anything that people can try and do to bash him over the head with it, here they come. And this is one example. The next one, when people talk about the machinery. Now, anyone who follows this sport like I do would understand that, yes, Formula One is more to do about the car itself than the driver behind the wheel. That is just straight facts. You are not, by any stretch of the imagination, going to get any arguments from me there. However, this is where I got to push back. This has been the case since Formula One's inception. You see, unlike other sports like football, for example, you will not see a Leicester City where a known underdog will win the championship over the course of the season, where the best team when it comes to Formula One now, the best team will always win over the course of the season. You see, in Formula One, it is extremely difficult because of how the tracks are, because of how everything's lined up, because even a tenth of a second over a course of a 60-lap race will equal you being lapped. The smallest finite details in regards to a car makes all the difference. So in order for a underdog team to really do something, it would have to be something extremely rare or something to happen in the race which would cause catastrophe, i.e. Spa, all the way back in those days where, if anyone remembers this, Jordan, they managed to, it was by miracle. If you ever watched that race, about 10 cars on the first lap got just taken out due to the horrible conditions, and Jordan managed to win one race. Just one race. And all of that took place just to win one race. There is no chance it could be done over the course of the season. But this is the thing. We know this. This has been the case since inception. So again, this is something which not only Lewis Hamilton has had to deal with, or say Lewis Hamilton gets the benefit of, it's been the same with all your great Formula One drivers in the past. Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell, Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, Sebastian Vettel. All of these people have won because their car has been the best car on the grid over the course of their season. So that argument there holds no water for me, because this has been something that has dogged Formula One throughout its whole entire time. That's not Lewis Hamilton's fault. He can only do what he can do in a car he has been given. But the part which people do not seem to want to talk about, and this is the other part of the equation which make it small in comparison to the machinery, but extremely sizable, which has been definitely seen, especially during this season and over the course of the last few years, and that is the driver behind the wheel. And that brings me on to the second point, and that is the competition at Mercedes. Now, people this year are moaning that Bottas is a number 2 driver. He's not someone like Verstappen who would be there to, really push Hamilton. And if Verstappen was in the same car as Hamilton won't be able to do what he's been doing over the last 2 years. And there's nowhere near Hamilton to be able to get all these race wins and, be clear and streaking ahead regards to the championship. Now, I agree with half of that with what was said, because I do agree with you. Bottas has definitely shown to be a completely number 2 driver. I mean, I thought some of it was because he's unlucky and all this other kind of stuff, but no. Especially after the weekend and over the last few weeks, it is clear more than ever he is a number 2 driver. And when it comes to the most crunch time, Bottas does not come close to what Lewis can do, even in the same machinery. However, when people talk about, if someone like Verstappen was in the same machinery, it would be a different story. Well, this is where I got to call out your Formula One knowledge when it comes to Lewis Hamilton, because again, this is people who either don't know what they're talking about, or, like I suspect, they're just trying to tear him down. Because the reason why I believe, personally, that Lewis should go down as the best Formula One driver of all time, even though it is extremely hard to compare generations, is because he is the only driver that has gone up against world-class champions toe-to-toe without being a number 1 driver. Now, what do I mean by this? You go look at the driving pairings that Lewis has had to deal with at his time at McLaren and Mercedes, and you compare that to who Schumacher, Alonso, Prost, Jenson Button had to do when they won their championships and their races, and it is chalk and cheese. Lewis Hamilton has had to face his first rookie season, Fernando Alonso, who was already at that time a 2-time world champion. He has had to face Jenson Button, who was a world champion before he got to Lewis Hamilton. He has had to face Rosberg, who won a championship. These are all drivers who aren't your run-of-the-mill number 2 drivers. They were all number 1 drivers in their respective teams before Lewis Hamilton was paired up with them. And guess what Lewis has never done? He has never shown to be afraid of challenges. He has never asked for any sort of better treatment from, I'm the number 1 driver, or I've been at McLaren for as long, I've got more, notoriety, I'm more famous. He has never asked, like other champions have, because keep this in mind now, Michael Schumacher, for all the praise that he gets, he has asked to be, he's always been the number 1 driver. The preferential treatment, same with Sebastian Vettel. He got preferential treatment, the number 1 driver, whereas Lewis Hamilton has never had that. And he's done it against not mediocre talent. So when I listen to these haters and listen to all these people talking about always this and always that, I'm like, listen, this is a guy who's done all of this, won all these races, all these championships against the talent that he's had to face over his generation. Please, you guys are showing yourself out to be the haters, which we already knew you guys were. And I'm not going to go into that racial element, but you can't help but say there's a tinge of this bigoted, prejudiced racial element that comes into place. But I don't have enough sufficient evidence to go into that. But you can always tell when people talk about Lewis Hamilton and they really go into why they hate him and they talk about all this kind of other crap. I'm like, you guys don't know what you're talking about and you guys don't give him enough credit that he deserves. This is a guy who has rose to each challenge every single time, and he is still meeting challenges which I didn't think was even possible given what has been achieved in Formula 1 so far. That's why, for me, he will go down as the greatest Formula 1 driver of all time. And also, if you're going to push me even more, I'll say this. So far, he is the greatest sportsman that Britain has ever produced. Beating any of your Formula 1 drivers, any of your boxers, any of your footballers who you love, any of your tennis players, he will go down as the greatest sports person that Britain has ever produced. And in my opinion, he deserves all the praise and adulation which you haters will refuse to give him. But I'm going to give it to him this day. Congratulations, Lewis Hamilton. You deserve this win, and you deserve the championship that you're going to get this year and everything else that comes off the back of it. Until next time, haters.